Hello, everyone. Hello, Dr. Tameka here. Thank you for joining me today for another episode of Student Access 101, where we discuss critical conversations in the pursuit of equitable education for students that are underrepresented. I am your host, Dr. Tameka. For those of you that may not know me, I am an educator. I am a motivational speaker, empowerment speaker, and a lover of all things educational advancement and growth. And today, the guest that I have today, I met him back in March of 2001. I had gone to a conference, the Next Level Speakers Conference. So whenever you step into something new, or if you're trying to advance yourself with the craft that you're doing, it's always good to get connected with a group of individuals that'll help you grow. And so that's what I did. I got connected with the Next Level Speakers Academy, and I got a chance to meet my next guest. He was on one of the panels. So there was a panel of very forward-thinking principals that are out of Atlanta, Georgia. And this particular person was on the panel, and I got a chance to meet him then. But I learned about him later on that there was some very unique things about the way that he approached education, approached his pedagogy. And so I was really interested to learn a little bit more about him. And so my next guest is an educator. He is a social justice advocate, hip hop enthusiast, magazine columnist, and of course, a principal to hundreds of amazing students in Atlanta. My next guest is André Benito Mountain. Principal Mountain, nice to see you. You're muted. Let's unmute you. Okay.
Good to see you too. Thanks for having me, Dr. Ellington.
Yes. And I'm going to read your bio so that everyone can get a better understanding of all the amazing value that you bring to your students on a daily basis. So I'm going to also, too, to represent your school, I'm going to make sure I add in your school's logo, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Theme school.
Yes. How long have you been principal there?
This is the 7th year.
Wow. That's amazing. And you know, as a former educator, I know how much of a dedication you have to have in order to go into an academic environment and to want to empower students all the time. I miss it so much. I was previously a professor. I was a professor at Kent State University for about 15 years, and and stepped away so that I can pursue my full-time entrepreneurial speaking life. And I miss my students desperately. I really do miss them. And so getting a chance to talk to individuals like yourself and other educators, you know, it really gets me an opportunity to get connected to students in another way, you know?
Well, we're inspired by the work you're doing. So continue doing what you're doing, because it gives us fuel and energy to continue this work.
Thank you. So Principal Mountain is the author of the best-selling book, Virtually Lost: Essays on Education in the Global Pandemic. He has spoken to thousands of educators around the nation and is transforming the way we embrace innovation in schools. He is also author of Principals Don't Walk on Water. I love that title. That's a pretty cool title. The Mountain Principles: Lessons on Leading and Learning, and the Brilliance Beneath. He is principal of Marble Elementary Traditional Theme School in Metro Atlanta, where their motto is to commit to the challenge, and the vision is moving from good to great. I love that. Absolutely. Yeah, there's never any room for mediocrity, ever, right?
That's right.
Absolutely. Principal Mountain is an accomplished instructional leader, educational advocate, former teacher with proven experience in creating effective and unique learning strategies to achieve academic excellence for public education institutions. He has an extensive background in data analysis, research-based instructional practices, and program implementation. He's editor-in-chief of Deaf Ed Magazine, a publication that focuses on education, hip-hop culture, and social justice. And he is a true believer that building trust in schools is something that can happen in very creative ways. And so that's one of the things that I love about the work that Principal Mountain has been doing, is because he goes about getting topics such as difficult topics like social justice and really being able to put a creative spin on it so that it can be approachable to everybody. So I want to just welcome Principal Mountain to Student Access 101. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Well, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and it's funny, as I was preparing for our interview, I'm like, man, I need to be playing in my background KRS-One, My Philosophy.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Or You Must Learn.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, how you grew up.
Well, I grew up in a small town, Swainsboro, Georgia. I was born in Swainsboro, Georgia, which is probably about an hour outside of Atlanta, of Savannah. And it's a really close-knit community. It is a community that, during that time, probably had less than 10,000 people in that town.
Wow.
Yeah, and, but my experience during my elementary years, they were so pivotal in terms of shaping who I am as a school leader, because I happen to be the son of two educators. My mother worked as a paraprofessional initially in a school, in elementary school, and my father was one of the first math professors at the local community college. He was one of the first Black math professors during the 1970s. And so, he was blazing a new trail during that time, and he went to Fort Valley State University, HBC.
Did he? I was just there a few weeks ago.
Yeah. So he came out of an HBCU. He grew up on a farm, and he went to Fort Valley, and he majored in agriculture. And his goal was to become an extension agent and help farmers be more effective in their work. So I grew up around people who were into gardening, community gardening, and just working with their hands, working with the land. But my father eventually became a math professor at this community college. And every afternoon I would spend my time in the back of his classroom watching him teach. And I didn't realize that was imprinting me with this passion for teaching, because during that time, it was the 1980s, he was teaching people who had been laid off from their jobs in factories. Factories were closing, going overseas to China, and he was educating them so they could go back to school and get other skills. That to me was my first glimpse at social justice, because I saw that your ability to earn income and support your family was inherently linked to your education level.
Absolutely.
As those factory jobs went away, you had to be prepared to pivot and earn income so you could support your family. So I always knew that education was something that I was really interested in, because it empowers our people.
Wow.
But during my middle school years, we moved to Augusta, Georgia, which is another city I call home, Augusta, Georgia.
You know what's funny? Okay, so when I went to Fort Valley, one of my guests on the podcast was a gentleman, Wydrate Nelson. Wydrate is also from Georgia. And so I told him that I was going to be going to Fort Valley, right? And he was like, well, it's not Atlanta. You're going to Georgia. That's what he told me. And he was like, you're going to Georgia. It's not like Atlanta. I was like, okay. Yeah. And so he, was kind of schooling me about it. And it's interesting because it's the total opposite of what you would think. Because I mean, most people get the picture of Atlanta and think that that's Georgia, and it's not.
Yeah. Atlanta is very unique. I call Atlanta Wakanda. This is
Yes.
But in 7th grade, we moved to Augusta, and I had a chance to go to an amazing school, A.R. Johnson Health Science and Engineering Magnet School. And I think that changed the trajectory of my life, because it was a school with such high expectations for students. And for me to be in a position that I am now as a school leader, I see the importance of us setting high expectations for our young people.
Yeah, absolutely. Me and your dad have some things in common. You said that he was the first Black professor at his school. Well, I was
Mhm.
also the first Black professor in my department.
Wow.
I was a professor for the School of Fashion and was the very first Black professor ever in the School of Fashion.
That is phenomenal. So
Yeah.
you're a history maker.
Huh? Yeah.
I say
Yeah.
you're making history.
Yeah, trailblazer, history maker. And I used to take my kids to school with me too. They used to sit in my classroom. And so as you were talking, I'm like, yes, my baby would be, they both of them would be in class with me. And sometimes, depending on what was going on, my students would be attending to my kids for me.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah,
And so
yeah,
you never know what kind of seeds that's planting for your children.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so we were all led to um, different experiences in our lives led us to our career choices. And so you already kind of talked a little bit about what led you to wanting to teach, but what was it that really made you passionate about this social justice piece?
Well, I look back and I look at my present, when I first started in education, um, looking back, when I was in Swainsboro, I happened to be in a program called Outlook. It was a program for gifted students. And I happened to be the only African American student in the class of 15.
Mm,
And I felt like something just didn't sit well with me about that situation. I
mm,
felt, even as a child, I knew that there were kids in my neighborhood who were in those other classes who should have been in there, who were very talented and gifted in different ways. And so I knew early on that there were some failures in public school in terms of identifying
mm,
talent in African American students.
mm,
The other thing in terms of my present, I just feel like that we as educators have to always be looking at ways to improve our current reality. So my first job was in the poorest school district in Georgia, which is Hancock County. I
mm.
Yeah, I had a substitute teaching position, long term, 6 months. But what I saw there was that these children needed access to a high quality education. Otherwise, they'd be doomed to just stay in that cycle of poverty. Education was their only way out. And so
Yeah.
I think me going from working in New York City as a financial analyst and then coming back to Georgia to jump into education, I landed in the poorest school district in the state.
Wow.
And I think that was important because I needed to see the power of education to help children lift themselves out of poverty.
Wow. Wow. That was, I mean, that set the stage for your whole career.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. In your book, Virtually Lost, you pose the question: we have placed a mask over the face of the real issue, improving the quality of schooling in urban communities. And so, with the thousands of people that you interview for the book, what were some of the results that came out that kind of shed a light on this topic?
Well, here's what came out of that. What I see is that people are constantly moving, and some of the decisions about moving is they're chasing the great schools.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
trying
Yep.
to move and trying to. And sometimes kids have 3 or 4 schools during their elementary years because parents are trying to find and jump on board with the greatest school.
Mhm.
Our responsibility as educators is to make sure that all of our schools have these elements of greatness, and whether it's in South DeKalb or it's in North Gwinnett or it's in Tacoma, Washington, we have to make sure that all of our children have access to a high quality educational experience. And I'm talking beyond test scores here. I'm talking about the experience of walking into a school where someone knows your name. I don't want to pull in Cheers, the old TV show Cheers, but kids want to walk into a school where you're greeted by name and people
Yes.
know you, and they can celebrate things that you've done or ask you about being on that basketball team or on that baseball team. And so those are some of the things that I think are very important in public education right now.
Right. Right. Wow. And so there are some social justice issues that came out of the research, I'm sure. What are some of the solutions? Because it's never good to just bring up a problem or issue unless we can figure out a solution to go with that. So, what are some solutions that came out of the research that you did?
All right, so here's some of the solutions. one of the things that came up in terms of social justice is students feel like they don't have voice. Yeah. So we have to create structures in our schools where students have voice, whether they're student representatives or whether we do surveys with students and get their feedback. We do surveys with teachers.
Yeah.
We do surveys with parents. But we have to also make sure that our students give us feedback on how to improve their school experience. They're there with us every day, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
The other thing is parent access and parent engagement.
Yeah.
You talk to parents, they want to feel welcome. They want to feel welcome in the school, but it's a precarious situation right now because we also have the issue of safety in schools.
Yeah.
So even today during dismissal, I had to talk to some parents. Unfortunately, I can't let them in the building during dismissal, and they understand the safety precautions along with that, but we have to also make sure that we tap them and get their feedback on, hey, so what are some of your thoughts about this first week? What are some things we did well? What are some things we can improve on? You have to establish a 360-degree loop of communication with parents where they give you feedback, you consider that feedback and vet that feedback, and you come back to them and say, all right, based on what you shared with us, here's what we're going to do differently.
Right. Wow. Yeah, it's because of all the things that have been going on, I mean, it makes security in a way, in some ways, the parents feel as though they're not quite, welcome in those spaces. So yeah, I see. Please tell us a little bit about the Deaf Ed magazine. I remember you had launched that a couple months ago, and I had an opportunity to look at the April issue that you have on your website, and there was a comment, or the title of one of the articles was Integration of Deliberate Hip Hop into the Curriculum by authors Corey Washington. And he discussed how hip hop music can really help students bring out some of their critical thinking skills. And I love that because any kind of way that we can get some creativity in the classroom or, getting the students to think in different ways, it will definitely lead to them having more critical thinking skills. And so how has working with hip hop in your school's pedagogy, or have you guys worked with hip hop in your schools, and how do you see that's bettering student access in urban communities?
Well, I'll tell you this. We started the day off today playing Nappy Roots. It's going to be a good day. We're going to have a good day. We embrace the culture of our students. If you poll my students, what music are you listening to? What music genre are you listening to? Inevitably, they're not going to tell you jazz or classical. They're not going to say bluegrass. They're going to say, we listen to hip hop. If they don't say hip hop, they're probably going to say R&B or something like that. But my thing is, first of all, we have to honor the culture of our students, the culture they bring into the school. And so if I listen to this type of music, but I never hear it acknowledged in my school, we already have a disconnect from the very beginning. So, while we're not in the school actively teaching kids how to rap, we do honor their culture, and then we segue into what we have, because it's almost like if you're an adult and you walk in a room, people acknowledge you. We grew up in the South, and they say you don't walk in a room without speaking. You have to acknowledge the people in the room. That's the same thing. And and so what we're doing with hip hop, we're establishing a hip hop literacy lab, because when you think about it, the hip hop artists are the modern day poets.
Absolutely.
They are modern day poets. So the same way that we lift up William Shakespeare and all of these other poets, we have to also honor the brilliance that comes out of the African American community and the African American tradition, with people like Jay-Z and Nas and Master Ace and Chubb Rock. Some of these guys have partnered with our school to support us in this initiative. KRS-One, who is also known as the teacher.
Absolutely.
So we have to honor the legacy of that culture that started in the late 1970s, and we have to make sure we educate our children on that, because even though it doesn't appear in the curriculum, we have to fill the gaps of that curriculum and make sure children understand who they are, because My Country 'Tis of Thee and all of these other things don't really connect with our young people as much as understanding where, this culture that is a billion-dollar industry now. It's the most popular music in the world. Where it
Yeah,
came and what was the intent of it? The intent was to give young people a voice.
absolutely. To give them an outlet, to give them a voice, to talk about topics that are pertinent. I mean, from the very beginning, hip hop music was a social justice platform, right?
That's that's right.
From the very beginning.
When Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five said broken glass everywhere,
Everywhere. Absolutely.
they're painting a picture of an urban community, an urban
Yeah.
landscape. This is what I'm seeing every day coming home from school.
Yeah. Wow. Um, Social emotional learning is a part of most schools, or it should be a part of the school system and the district and what their goals are. And for those of you that don't know, social emotional learning is also called SEL. And it's a way for the school district to focus the curriculum, looking at not only just the academic parts of a student, but what they call the whole student, and educating the whole student, them on a personal level, mindfulness within the students, and then of course academic. And so mindfulness education in regards to hip hop communities, how has SEL how has hip hop been able to kind of work with that focus of SEL, and being able to focus the pedagogy in a way to accomplish some of those SEL goals that you all have in schools?
Well, I would say the hip hop piece has kind of operated in a different space from SEL, but we have always seen the fact that you have to front load that the SEL piece. We can't have schools that is just reactionary and punitive.
Yeah,
Kids act out. We have to get to the root issue of why are our kids acting out?
yeah,
What is the issue? And I will tell you, in the community that I'm in, I have students who have had siblings that they've lost to gun violence. I have families who are currently living in hotels, and so these things are traumatic experiences that affect a student's school day. And we can't say leave it at the door. We have to help them unpack their feelings. And so one of the things we do is we do a morning meeting. We tap into how people are feeling. And it's been a struggle getting there because some teachers feel they're so driven with content, people feel the pressure of the public school system and the institution. And they think, all right, 7:45, let's get right to math. No, we have to pause and say, how's everybody doing today? Anybody, have anything they want to share? What are your goals for the day? We have to build a sense of community. So that's one of the first things. This was our first week of school. And our goal this week is to just forge and build a classroom community. The content is coming. It's
yeah,
coming. But what you have to do first is acknowledge the people in the room, who they are. Do they have siblings? What are their hopes? What do you want to be when you grow up? What did you do this summer? And just unpack that first. And I think
right.
that's the first step. But the other thing is when students have issues with one another, social media has created platforms for students to interact beyond our school day.
Yeah,
Those things trickle back into the school. So we have
yeah,
counselors. We have an amazing counselor, Miss Nichelle Tanks, who does a wonderful job of pulling students together to work through issues and talk through issues. The very thing we want adults to do, we're teaching our students to do that at an early age. And I think that's going to pay off in the long run.
One of the things that when I was preparing for our interview, I saw that there was a topic of trust in schools.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, what you're talking about with building the community is just a means of building trust. And as an educator, what I noticed in my classes is, and the difference between me and my colleagues is if the students don't feel like they can trust you, then the work won't get done.
That's right.
The work won't get done.
Absolutely.
Or either it'll get done half-assed, because the students are not going to come and ask questions because they don't feel like they can come and talk to you. And so that's a whole nother topic that we could talk about on another day, the importance of getting students to trust the teachers and the staff in the schools. So building the community, that's amazing. And I'm hoping that will be able to trickle into the rest of your school year.
I'll say this, going back to growing up in Swainsboro and growing up in a small town, it was very racially segregated. So no matter what you did for a living, all the black people lived in one neighborhood, and all the white people lived in another. So we lived next door to the brick mason, to the factory worker. All of us were in the same neighborhood. But one of the things I noticed in a place like Metro Atlanta is that there are these class divisions. And what we have to make sure of, when we have teachers who are middle class and upper middle class, who have gotten their education and they're living in the mini mansion and the neighborhood with sidewalks, the kids you teach don't always have that experience, and you can never be so far removed from that. And I appreciate having grown up in a neighborhood with everyone of all different classes, because what it did, it gave a glimpse into their lives that were very different from my life as the child of a college professor. And I think what is happening in cities like Atlanta, there's a class divide, and we have to make sure we acknowledge and we embrace and welcome students who don't have and whose parents don't have education. We got to be able to communicate with them about data and community resources and all of those things. And we can't look down on them. We have to pull them up.
Absolutely. So, social justice in the classroom is not always just about race. It's not always it's not always just about race, but as we know, and especially in Atlanta, Atlanta is just a very unique place. It's like you said, it's Wakanda, right? It is definitely Wakanda. There are a lot of Black families there that are well-to-do families. And I can definitely see how there would be almost like a divide in a way, amongst the haves and the have-nots. Where I'm from, I live in Ohio. We don't really have very many Black people that are very, very wealthy, like what you see in Atlanta. And so that whole experience, I didn't even get a chance to even really witness it until my first time coming to Atlanta, when I first met you guys, when you were on the panel that March. Being able to see, Black people that were millionaires, right? And getting an opportunity to be close to those individuals. In Ohio, you rarely ever see something like that. And so I can definitely see how that can become a problem.
Absolutely. And we have to make sure that our educators understand how to make folks feel welcome. And how to hear those kids and also how to be adapters. And what I mean by that is, I travel a lot, and there, inevitably your cell phone goes dead. And so sometimes in the airport, there are these adapters that, depending on what type of phone you have, you can still plug in and get a charge, right? We got to make sure that we have educators that can help families, no matter what their income level, plug in to a great education, plug into community resources, plug into enrichment opportunities. We have to make sure everyone has access. We have to be the adapters to make sure all of our families have access to the resources that are available.
I was listening to a conversation that you were having with someone else. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but what struck me about that conversation was that you were talking about, you found out that one of your students was related to you. And you were saying that teachers should always treat their students as if they are related to them. And like I said, that whole piece about trust, that comes with love as well, right? And when you love your students and they can feel that love, then it's going to make the relationship so much different, and they're going to want to do the work for you because they know that you care, right? And so I would love for you to talk a little bit more about that, like how teachers can approach students as if, they are a part of their family.
Well, one of the goals I've had is try to learn every name of every student, and it's gotten easier over time. I remember when I first came to the school and I walked around with the principal and she was greeting all these students by name. I said, wow, I was really impressed by that. And so I really have worked hard to try to especially learn that my newer students because the ones who've been there for years, I've learned those and I've learned the siblings, but now we took in over 80 new students this year. And so I'm trying
Wow.
to learn names, but students shouldn't feel invisible in school.
Mm.
I don't remember my principal ever calling me by name. I don't
Mm.
remember that. And so I want to make sure my students have the experiences that I wasn't able to have. And so I try to be visible. I try to be as accessible as possible. I try to make sure that parents know they can reach out to me. I handwrite cards and postcards and letters to students to just check in on them over the summer. Those are things that as principals we need to do, because we don't want to be that principal who's just in the office or the person you see on stage.
Mhm.
You want to be
Yeah.
someone who's relatable and connected to these children and these families.
And accessible.
Absolutely.
As you were talking, I was starting to think about my growing up and which one of my school principals was my favorite. And I remember my favorite school principal was a lady, Mrs. Hobbs. She was my middle school principal. And the reason why I liked her is because she knew me, you know, she knew who I was, and she would sometimes invite me to have lunch with her, And so out of all my principals that I've had, she was my absolute favorite because, like you said, I mean, you try to know the students' names, and that makes such a big difference.
It does. It
Yeah.
really does.
Yeah. Wow. Is there anything that we didn't discuss that you would like to touch on?
I want to touch on a couple things.
Okay.
I think one of the things that I want to make sure that we make pervasive in public education is this idea of parent engagement and parent empowerment.
Oh, yeah.
Parent engagement. We want parents to be engaged, coming to PTA, participating in events, helping out around the school. But parent empowerment is a whole different discussion.
Absolutely.
I want to empower my parents. I want to show them, if you don't know how to help with homework, let's create a parent workshop and help you with that. If you need your resume done, let's create a parent workshop and let's help you get your resume right. Because if I can help mom or dad get a better job, that's going to help my student.
Absolutely. Yeah, I just did a speaking engagement for East Cleveland Schools. East Cleveland Schools is probably one of the poorest school districts here in Ohio. And they have a whole center dedicated to just parent empowerment. And so they had me come in and do two different sessions with the parents. And it makes such a big difference. I mean, because if the parents are doing well, then the kids will do well. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. The other thing is that we worked on at Marbury Traditional Theme School is access to high quality literature. If you go into your school's media center, I grew up, there was Dick and Jane books and Hardy Boy mysteries, Berenstain Bears. But those were the books that I had access to. But I didn't see books that had people who looked like me.
Absolutely.
And I want to make sure that my children in my school that happens to be 98% African American, they can go to a bookshelf and pick out a book that has the story of a Black girl or a story of a Black boy who's struggling with something. I want to make sure the literature reflects the people that are walking up and down the hallways.
Yeah, that's so important. I mean, even because your grades are what grades do you have? You have K through 5. Is that what you have?
Pre-K through 5th.
Pre-K through 5th. And so even growing up as little girls, as you were talking, the first thing that came to my mind was my mom being really particular about getting me dolls that were dolls of color, and how important that is and what impression that makes. I mean, so of course our books, the toys that the kids play with, having a representation of self is very, very important. Absolutely.
Yes. If you walk around Marbury Traditional Theme School, you're going to see images. Even if you look right behind me, there's an image of Haile Selassie. And there's also one in our office at work, because I want our students to understand that African men have been in leadership for years. So Barack Obama wasn't the first Black leader of a nation. There were many African American men who've led nations. And so we got to make sure that we educate our children beyond what's in the curriculum and what's in the textbook. I will tell you, before I was a school administrator, I worked as a social studies curriculum coordinator. And I would visit classrooms And I would see in some high school history classes, like the big Confederate flag, you
Oh,
know,
wow.
and so unpacking the learning environments that we have our children in, and some of the subtleties and the cultural responsiveness of our teachers is so important, because we're all sending our children to school so that they can be made whole, by the educational system. And so we got to make sure that we're cognizant of the subtle things that are going on in schools. Parents need to be present. Educators need to have those courageous conversations, because when you think about the complexity of issues of race in America, it's going to take courageous folks to get us on the right track.
Absolutely. People that aren't afraid to speak up, people that are not afraid to make change. One of the things that I wanted to ask you as you were speaking, in regards to, you said about 90, you said about 90% and 90, about what was the percentage of your students being students of color?
98%.
98%. So does your faculty reflect that, or is there more, what's the demographic of your faculty?
It mirrors the
Does
students.
it?
Yeah, and so I'm glad you asked that, because prior to coming here, I was working in Tacoma, Washington, and Washington State is less than 4% African American.
Yeah.
And so I found myself working in a school district where none of the students really, or the staff really looked like me. And so coming to Atlanta was really like, coming home to South Beach, what did LeBron say? Home to, I wanted to come and make sure I served my community.
Yeah.
I always tell my students, your education doesn't belong to you. Your education belongs to your community. So if you have gone out and gotten this education, what are you doing to make sure that you give back to the community? And that's how I feel every day when I walk into my school.
Well, your school is an anomaly in many cases. In the schools here, my children's schools are about 40-60 split. So about 40% students of color, 60% non-students of color. And the teachers do not reflect that. Out of their school, at my son's school, I think there's maybe 1 or 2 Black teachers out of the whole faculty. And so we still, and here in Ohio, we still have quite a bit of an issue with the disparity in demographics of our teachers. Yeah.
I think one of the things we also have to unpack, and I know this is maybe difficult for people to hear, but we still have this mentality in the African American community that if my child sits beside a white student, somehow they're getting a better education.
Woo, that's deep.
And so we have to make sure that we let people know that you can have a school that's 98% African American, and we can still have a powerful and exceptional education. You don't have to drive your child to another community where it's more white children to feel like you're getting something better. So I just wanted to put that out there.
That's deep. I mean, there's so many layers to that, because I mean, as we know, our schools with our students of color oftentimes are underfunded. And so a lot of, things that come with being underfunded, will definitely have an effect on what the students have a capability of learning. So it's hard. It's hard as a parent, because you want your children to have the best. It's difficult, and that's excuse me, a hard decision to make, when a parent has to try to figure out what you said is the best. And like you said, a lot of parents have been like shuffling around the kids, trying to figure out the best school to send them to. And it's a difficult decision. It really is.
It is. It is.
Well, thank you so much, Principal Mountain. It was wonderful to talk to you, and a pleasure to see you again. I don't even know, you probably don't even remember me. Do you remember me?
I remember you. You. Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
Yes. So thank you so much. And it's been wonderful to speak with you, and I will wish you a good night.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Ellington, for having me. This has been a great experience, and thank you for inspiring us as educators. Your Student Access 101 is something that I watch often, and it's really helping me to just reframe my thinking as an educator.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, student access comes in so many different forms. It's not just about the classroom. It's about as we said, the whole student. I mean, one of the people that I had on was from Ohio Planned Parenthood. She's the VP or the CEO actually of Ohio Planned Parenthood. And sexual reproduction health is very important for our students, you know, so it's student access comes in lots of different forms.
Absolutely. So I want to share with folks, if you want to check out Deaf Ed Magazine, go to
Yes.
defedmagazine.com, www.defedmagazine.com.
Yes, thank you so much. And how else would you want people to stay in touch with you? Well, you're on LinkedIn and you're on Facebook, right?
Yes, I'm on LinkedIn, André Benito Mountain, and I'm on Facebook as well. André Benito Mountain is a page. Follow me. You know, I'm on Instagram, Deaf Education on Instagram, and I'm always sharing some things that are going on with the school and with the work I'm doing beyond the school. So follow us and stay connected, because you know it's about sharing. Education is about sharing ideas and creating a spark so that we can all just do better work for our children and our communities.
Absolutely. And with a name like Mountain, you got to be great.
That's right. There is no
Yes.
elevator to the top. You got to take the stairs. You got to climb that mountain.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Have a wonderful evening, Principal Mountain.
All right. Take care. Thank you so much.
See ya. Thank you. And so, everyone, thank you all for joining me today. And this is the part of the podcast where I talk a little bit about the research that goes into me preparing for these conversations. I think it's really important as an educator and researcher myself that I back up whatever we're talking about with a little bit of research. And so on the bottom of the screen, you all see a banner that's ticking across. This is the information. This is the article, one of the articles that I read that talked a little bit about the benefits of having hip hop education in our classrooms. And so the author Van Fawn talked about 4 different reasons why using hip hop in education is really a benefit to the students. And so I'm going to go over those for you. Number 1, you'll speak students' language, which gives, in many ways, students the ability to grasp hard or boring concepts faster and easier. When you use hip hop in the curriculum and pedagogy, students have a better way of grappling with the topics and comprehending those topics. Number 2, you'll foster mutual respect and trust, because students will feel as though they can relate to you. And that's something that me and Principal Mountain were just discussing, the importance of teachers having a situation where their students feel as though they can trust them. And if you bring hip hop into your classroom, you will definitely be able to establish some trust amongst your students. Number 3, you'll model positive behavior and attitudes. The author was saying that you are showing students that the proper response to adversity is not to flight, despair, or dismissal. It is action, discussion, and collaboration, all ideals that are heavily promoted in hip hop culture and the academic space alike. And number 4, you'll teach them to overcome fear, using hip hop to talk about tough topics such as peer death and child abuse are all reasons why teachers can incorporate hip hop into their curriculums. And so I really hope that this episode has educated and empowered you. Educators listening, if you are looking for creative ways to add fire to your curriculum, try hip hop. You don't have to be an expert. The best teachers learn with their students. And so this episode of Student Access 101 was brought to you by Be the GOAT, Career Readiness Manual for First Generation Students and Young Professionals. Please support my mission to provide these critical skills to 1,000 students by the end of the year. I am halfway there, and you can purchase this book on Amazon. If your school is looking to purchase the book in bulk, you can reach out to me at info@drtamekaellington.com. And I've also started developing a course called the Be the GOAT Career Readiness System. I'll be promoting it in schools and universities across the nation, launching in fall. So watch out for it. And thank you all for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a comment on YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn, and please share in your circles. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you're not already subscribed. And together we can change the trajectory of equitable education for underrepresented students. And always remember, let's empower and educate, because there's no success without student access. Have a good night, everyone.